Hey, welcome to another episode of Don't Kill the Messenger, where we help you create conversations that lead to relationships and that eventually lead to business. So today I have Alyson here, and she helps agencies grow their capacity for more clients by deploying a simple operating structure. Hey, Alyson.
Hey, how's it going, Victor? Thanks for having
Good,
me.
good. So I know you and I ended up working together. We did a few things. You helped us process out so much. It's just like at the start, I know for sure one of the things is I didn't realize I needed all that stuff, right? You're kind of just stuck in this, like, oh, I'll do it, right? So is
hmm
that kind of something you get all the time, or like what? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, totally. So, obviously, as you experience growth in your business, right, and you become, kind of from the freelancer to a solopreneur, and then from a solopreneur to an actual entrepreneur, and then, so forth to the actual business owner, right? You kind of shed your skin, for lack of a better term. And one of the things that I feel like folks kind of really experience when they go from being entrepreneur or solopreneur to a business owner, right? Meaning that they're leading a team, they've got, lots of things set up, right, to actually make it a viable, sellable asset. One of the biggest things that we notice is that, systems and SOPs are one of the big catalysts there. So it's funny because when you're kind of moving from the solopreneur mindset of I'm doing the selling, I'm doing the project management, I'm doing the fulfillment, then your mindset starts to change a little bit to, okay, wait a second, what are the best practices for selling? What are the best practices for project management? And what are the best practices for fulfillment? And how can we document those so that I don't have to do them all the time? So it's really just kind of a reframing opportunity for as you grow, right, to kind of perceive things a little bit differently.
Yeah, no, and I love that because I know you start to kind of think about like who can help me, and everyone's. I feel like you'll probably get this question all the time, like who do I hire first? And I
hmm
feel like that question really is kind of like it depends, right? Depends on like where it is after you've created processes. Then we start to see like, this is where you need the most, this is where you can get the most return on your processes, right? I know
Yeah.
that's something you did for us for sure. And like, that was definitely just, we're like, wow, I didn't think that's where we would need someone first, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's fun. It's fun. When you start to go down that rabbit hole, you can really say, okay, I'm not just hiring just to hire, right? I'm actually hiring to help me create a result that I'm willing to pay for, right? Something that you know that if you're spending time doing it and your dollar per hour amount to the company is worth X, someone else comes in and they do it for another amount and you're natively saving money just by defining procedures. So it's really cool to kind of play with it like that.
yeah, and I know for me, one of the biggest hesitations for me, I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to sit down and write all of these things out. And I have to like literally take hours upon hours on top of what I'm already doing. And I know like you make it so like you're for real, your system has been just like I just have to show up, do my thing, and then you guys take over the heavy lifting and kind of I don't know what happens in the background, but all of a sudden we have this like system that like everything just works. It's repeatable. Someone can come in and do exactly what I was doing. So
That's
what would you
awesome.
say is when someone reaches that point of like where is it that they kind of start to notice like, hey, this can be something that can turn into a process that's repeatable or something like that?
Sure. So, specifically for service businesses, agencies, coaches, folks like that, really what we like to look at are three factors, right? When you start to get to a point in your business where you're kind of growing, you've got a team, you've got a multitude of clients, a couple things start to happening that are like kind of signals, right? So the first thing is scope creep, right? You invite a person into the business and it seems like you've priced them at a point and that is totally not what you should have charged them, right? It should have been probably way up here
Yeah.
just because, right, the project starts to kind of get off the rails, right? It gets out of hand. So that's the first thing. If you're like running around like crazy trying to fulfill or you feel like projects are taking a long time, those types of things, right? Second thing is results, right? Like if your clients start to experience a dip in results, you want to make sure that first of all, you're taking a look at, okay, well, if this is happening, right, maybe our, process or our productization needs to be a little bit more streamlined, right? If folks aren't, if it's me working on my business or if it's me working in my business, right? If I make that shift, I'm not directly responsible for results and those start to dip. So that's a key indicator. And then the third thing is feast or famine months. This is a huge one because oftentimes what happens with service providers specifically and coaches is if they're selling and they're also fulfilling, they have a month where for sure they're dedicated to sales and then they need to fulfill on those things. So then what happens to the revenue? It dips, right? Yeah. Until you've shored up those projects and then you can focus on sales again. So really your business is going like this, which is hectic for like so many reasons. I mean, I can't even list all the reasons. So those are the three big indicators for me that I come in when I talk with a new owner and I'm like, hey guys, what's been happening? Those are the most common things we see and most of the signals I say to pay attention to.
Okay. So yeah, no, I mean, that sounds like that's kind of where we ended up reaching out to you, where you and I talked on an event in June, just before the end of Q2, I believe. Mm-hmm. And we were like talking about like, hey, we're feeling like we're at this point of we might need to do something like this because like personally there were some things happening in the background, like my wife's pregnant and everything like that. But and we needed to get her kind of taken away, like what's going to happen when she can't do stuff. And it's like, I feel that that's very similar to a solopreneur who is like, if I'm the one doing everything, like how can I take a sick day if I'm not there and nothing happens? So it's interesting to see like those signals are really what are helping you to identify like about we're ready for processes or ready for growth in that stage and whatnot.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're identifying them early enough, then hopefully the kind of team aspect doesn't become an issue, right? Yeah. If you're creating these things as you're growing your team and creating the processes before you invite someone to be part of your team, I mean, something just as easily as what you and Izzy are going through, right? Her being absent from the business for a long period of time, that happens with folks who maybe have team members leave, right? So if, you could be caught in a terrible spot where you're lucky that Izzy's awesome and she's your wife and she can come back in and help you, but sometimes folks even experience staff turnover, and that's where the processes that live up here and the training that lives up here, it goes out the door with those people. So if we really want to like turnover proof our business in the same effort, that's something that I've, had experience with, past clients who've had someone leave. They're like, oh my goodness, what do I do? And so we really want to try to alleviate that stress and really that like lapse in fulfillment by making sure that we're structuring those roles on the front end too. It's super important.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I know one of the things I remember you did end up telling me was you mentioned something along the lines of like, now that when you go to hire somebody, you can see like return on that hiring or that person almost immediately, right? Because then you still have to train somebody to a certain extent, but there's not as much learning, it seems, when there's a system to follow. Mm-hmm. So like, can you dive into that a little bit more? Like what is it that kind of people, I guess, where people get stuck there?
Yeah, of course. So I think, and I'll just use a specific use case because I think every solopreneur who grows their business to a certain point is like, I need an assistant, right? That's like the next thing. And they're like, I just need someone to take all this stuff off my plate. And so I think that's problematic for a couple of reasons. Is first and foremost, oftentimes when we think assistant, right, we think of someone to take things off of our plate. But oftentimes, if we're in a position where we're getting results for our clients, or we're managing campaigns, or writing copy, right? Those three things is copywriter, campaign manager, project manager, right? That's three separate roles that are not even assistants, right? Because right now, what you're probably doing isn't a ton of admin work, right? You're getting results. So you need another person who can help get results. And the best way to train someone who is a little bit green in your business, right, a new person, is to kind of just write that down and make sure that we're understanding, okay, this is the specific process or the specific checklist to follow. And now when they're invited into your business, instead of spending time on top of your already full plate training them, they can go through this thing, start to get some results for your clients, and you can say, hey, listen, these pieces are great. I'm going to train you around these pieces. And then not only the training is kind of expedited, right? But then what we're taking a look at too is the success of the person is actually expedited, right? They can actually become more effective more quickly and take more things off of your plate if we've got kind of that baseline to follow. So truthfully, when we talk about ROI, right? If you're taking someone on, let's just say at a 60K salary to be a results person for you, right? That person is ROI positive in month one because they're being trained and getting results for you quicker than someone, let's just say that you need to train manually and spend day in and day out, right? Their ROI to the company is worth more in the beginning than someone who, say, takes 6 months to get it, right?
Yeah.
Because you're paying that salary.
Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, geez, I didn't even think about stuff like that. That opens up a whole new mess of things, and I don't. Yeah, it's interesting though. Like something I heard recently, someone said when you have systems in place like this, it allows you to kind of grow better as a team, because when something goes wrong, there's not like a who's to blame, but like what went wrong in the system. Is that something like you can speak on a little bit, or?
Sure. So this is my personal philosophy, and I've said this often to a lot of folks who come into my world. I feel like there's kind of three bases that need to be covered as we're like identifying variables in the business. First is processes, right? So it's our actual step-by-step stuff. We call those standard operating procedures. The second is like systems and tech, right? So it's like the project management tool you use, the sales pipeline you use. And then the third variable is team members, is people, right? So if we can cover the bases, right? Meaning if we can say, look, our processes are so dialed in, it's incredible. Our systems fit perfectly into what we want those processes to create, meaning our tech stack is awesome. Then the only variable there is the person. Right?
Okay.
So then what you can say in terms of managing somebody, you can say, hey, listen, person X, Y, or Z, right? Your KPIs are these things, and you're supposed to run through these processes, and you're supposed to use these systems in a certain way. And you can come at this from a really objective perspective, meaning that you can say, you can really indicate who is great for a role and who isn't great for a role, and then easily identify, is it a process issue, is it a person issue, or is it a system or a tech issue? Gotcha.
And that actually clarifies that a lot more for me too, because I know when I heard that, I was kind of like, I don't fully understand that, but I think you said it perfectly. It does allow you to take the emotion out of it and look at it from an objective standpoint, to just be like, yeah, what went wrong? Like, did you follow the process? Did the system break? Or like, did you just not follow the process? Like one of those three things happened that ended up breaking what we got, the result that we didn't expect, or something like that. Yeah, no, I love that. So that kind of brings me to, I guess, what would you say to someone who kind of feels that they know they need to do this, but like, where do they start? Because I know for me, I was kind of like, luckily I know you, so like I knew I knew who to go to, but I was kind of like, man, we attempted it on our own, and I was just like, I started doing stuff and started writing this out, and like, that's just not my jam. For me, I was kind of like pulling my hair out, and pass it off to Izzy, and I feel bad, but she loved it. Luckily, but I don't feel like everyone's going to have that luxury. So like, where would you say someone could start? How would they start this on their own, or like, what should they do?
Yeah, so I think my favorite thing is to start first and foremost with fulfillment. So like, you've made an amount of promises already to clients that you currently have, and getting great results is how you stay in business, quite frankly. So I think that if you're looking at a situation where you don't have a streamlined onboarding process and you don't have a way to duplicate your projects, meaning repeatable results processes for your fulfillment, I would start to at the earliest, line something like that out. Say, okay, when somebody onboards with us, here's the ideal flow, right? And then try to fill in those pieces. If you're going to bootstrap it yourself, those are the two biggest things I personally think that, businesses could use, when they're kind of in that, smaller range, the solopreneur moving into the business owner range, right?
Okay,
So those are the first two, because all it's going to do is nurture the people that are already, kind of coming into your world, already transacting with you, and it's going to get better results for the people that are there, which hopefully, right, grows your business long term, right? So those are the first kind of, like, if I had to triage, that's the first place I would go.
It makes sense.
And then truthfully, I think from a tactical perspective, the first best thing you could do is really centralize your SOPs, right? So like if you already have checklists, if you already have any sort of standard operating procedures written, anything that can benefit the workflow as a whole, I would centralize that as soon as humanly possible and give your entire team access and say, hey guys, that way if you're creating things, they know where it is, right? Like they don't have to ask you, oh, hey, where's that one worksheet from that one workshop we did 6 months ago? You're like, no, it's in my playbook. Go grab it. Like use it right now.
That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. No, I love that. And something you said triggered something else. I know you said this is what our ideal client flow looks like. What would you say if you have a process, if something happens in between there that you're like, what happened? Like some client, like new client just comes on and you're just like, this is, I don't know what just happened. You know what I mean? Just, is that something you think falls on? I guess we can look back on those three things. Like, was it a system thing, a person who didn't follow the process, or was it a process that didn't account for that in the first place, or whatever it may be?
Yeah, so I would definitely apply those three filters to all of your workflows, right? Was this the person that was running it? Is it the way that the processes are actually lined out, or is this a system thing? Maybe you guys are using the wrong project management tool. And by wrong, I mean not the ideal one for your specific situation.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so many times I get asked, well, what's the most effective project management tool? Well, my short answer is it's the one that you're going to use, right? It's the one that when you line out your client onboarding process on a whiteboard or on paper and you say, okay, this is what this visually looks like, choose the project management tool that's going to most natively align with what you've lined out, right? Don't try to create your client experience or create your onboarding flow and then pigeonhole it into one specific thing that you don't even like using. That's where things get problematic, because they try to fit their ops into something that already exists, another blueprint, but really ops can and are honestly the most fun to be defined by you, by the successes you've already experienced, by your clients, how they want to hear from you, how they expect to kind of their cadence, right, with coaching with you or working with you on one-on-one services. So what you want to do is line that out, as thoroughly as possible, and then say, okay, if my process is visual and I myself am a visual business owner, maybe adding it into something like Trello is really important. Or if it's a lot of compliance stuff, like if it's something with like lending, right, or like mortgages, I would probably even put that in like Monday, right, because that's very checklist oriented, right? Or like Asana. Asana is very checklist oriented, even though it has those list aspects. So really say, instead of getting a bright, shiny new thing, right, and like forcing your processes into it or your projects into it, really say, what are my flows, right? What exists and what's the most ideal thing for my clients? And then truthfully shop around, right? Take a look at some things that really can benefit you in the long term.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah, I know. We did that a couple of times with not with like onboarding workflow, but a lot of our back end stuff. We were kind of like shopping around, like, and I think we did it by accident, right? It was kind of like this is how we do things. What has the best options for what the way we do it, right? And it just happened to be one software, and we were like, great, that works. So, and but I think a lot of people might have trouble with that. They do that exact thing, force their whatever it is they're doing into something else because it seems cool, and like I actually looked at Asana before, and I was kind of like, this just seems too confusing for me, and no thanks. So I went with like Google Drive at first, and then we kind of stuck with that for a while, and then you brought us on to Trello, and that was I was like, oh, this is fantastic. Like I love it. It's very similar to the way I think we were running it in Google Drive. So it kind of allowed things to just flow even naturally into that. So first, thanks for that. Second, like I'm glad that you brought that up there. So
Of course.
I guess, what would you say, because I know with one of the questions that I was thinking of was when it came to after you do like onboarding stuff, after those first two pieces, what would you say is like the next step for, I guess, an agency or anyone that's growing into that next level as far as like creating processes or anything like that?
Yeah, so I would say the next step for an agency specifically, or kind of any one-on-one service provider, is a maintenance kind of section. So
Okay.
that's typically the way that we tackle our stuff. We take a look at how we're onboarding clients, how we're fulfilling on them, meaning creating repeatable projects and assets that we can leverage, and then how we're maintaining them, right? Because agencies and anyone who has kind of like, that retainer service model in their business, and that same thing goes for coaches, right? If coaches have year-long programs, they want to make sure that they get amazing results, right? Kind of set that stage in the first couple months, and then say, okay, how are we maintaining this over time, right? Really creating a routine that goes into somebody's business or into somebody's life, right? A routine that goes into their marketing that can consistently generate a specific amount of leads, right? Or sales for them. Okay.
Right.
So maintenance is for sure the third bucket, and in my opinion, one of the most important ones, because first of all, it makes the month-over-month work of your team really streamlined. So developing something like a client dashboard or a scorecard, something that you're reporting on metrics to your clients just to be really transparent with them.
Yep.
And we would just let your KPIs of your program decide those things. So what goes into kind of your scorecard or your client dashboard.
Right.
And then the second thing about maintenance is just making sure that you're keeping them, right? It's big with retention. So we want to make sure that like there's retention processes in place, right? That you're having conversations with them at certain points, making sure that we're keeping them in the program, making sure that we're keeping them in the agency, because obviously everyone knows, right? It's far cheaper to keep a client than it is to go out and get a new one.
Yep.
So hopefully by just focusing on those three buckets kind of as the first thing, the foundation, right? We can capitalize on who we've already invited to get results in our business, right? How we've already gotten those results and keep them with us so that natively, right, any new sale that we get is just something that contributes to the growth of the business over the long term, right? Because we want to keep our people, we want to get amazing results for them, and we want them to, stay with us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So just to recap those three initial main steps, and I think the order that you mentioned in priority was like fulfillment, onboarding, then maintenance.
Yeah, I would say onboarding, fulfillment, maintenance. Yeah.
Okay.
Because, the reason I start with onboarding is because first of all, it's easy. And second of all, no business owner, and I know that you service providers who are listening to this, and I know that you and I talked about this at one point, Victor, it's like you make a sale and you're like, oh my gosh, what am I doing next? And you feel like everything stops, and then you have to like go and do an amount of things. And like, if I had to stick my flag in the ground over a couple of things, like that would be one of them, because you should never feel like that feeling when you make a sale in your business. It should be a really happy time. And so for me and for the clients that I've worked with, you make a sale and you're like, yes, my team's got it. Like, I'm good.
Yeah, no,
you know what I mean?
Fantastic. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, that's kind of, we have a couple minutes here left, but I guess anything else that you want to recap on to kind of outside of those three steps that we just talked about for anyone listening on like starting processes or like knowing when it's time to actually start to do those?
Yeah, I would say my last and final tip is just to make sure that you establish some type of rhythm to check in with yourself and your business, right? So if that's something, and truthfully, this is top of mind for me because I just did quarterly planning with my team.
Yep.
And this whole checking in and making sure that things are going well is kind of top of mind. So whether that's weekly, it's monthly, it's quarterly, it's yearly, just kind of establishing a way for if some of those things are happening to you, right? The scope creep, the feast or famine, all the things I talked about before, or maybe if you're experiencing like clients leaving, you're not maintaining them very well, or you're not keeping them or retaining them. what I would say is establish a way to check on that, right? Because what you don't want to do is kind of wait until something really bad happens to then react to that thing. Really decide, okay, if I'm tracking how many active accounts I have weekly, I can literally see the dips, right? And where I lose clients. And I can literally see if I'm tracking these things. So start to just put something like that in place where you're visiting with your numbers on, you know, on a cadence, right? Whatever that cadence might be, you'll need to decide. But at the very least, what you can do is be objective to your data, right? And you can actually recognize the signals when they happen so that you don't lose a ton of clients and or lose a ton of team members or however that looks for that specific situation, and you're not caught in, you know, obviously something that you would rather not be caught in. So I think paying attention and building in those times to just check in with the business, check in with your clients, check in with your team, and really assess on what the next best step is probably my biggest additional kind of you know, advice to anybody listening.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I appreciate having you on. You know, I'd love to keep chatting. Yeah, again. So thank you so much for coming on, and I will talk to everyone next time.
Thanks, Victor.
Yep. Where is it? Oh man, this is